Hello, and welcome back to the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum, FP&A Strategies for Success. My name is Michael with Argyle. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our panel moderator. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat, and we will address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our moderator, Stacy Snyder, Senior Vice President, Finance and Accounting Direct Hire with Addison Group. We're excited to have Stacy and our panelists with us for a panel discussion titled Finding, Hiring, and Retaining the Best FP&A Team. Stacy, thank you so much for being here today. Welcome back, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Stacy Snyder. I am Senior Vice President of Accounting and Finance Executive Search at Addison Group. I have a degree in accounting from St. Edward's University in Austin, Texas, and was in accounting for roughly 5 years before moving over into staffing with Robert Half. I spent about 6.5 years with Robert Half before moving over to Addison Group roughly about 5 years ago. Since then, I've expanded the footprint from Austin, San Antonio, Phoenix, Minneapolis, and we just opened our Atlanta branch this year as well. So excited to be here. Thank you all for joining. And now I'd like to introduce all of our panelists. First off, Ms. Lisa Cummings.
Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lisa Cummings. I am Head of Corporate Finance, Senior Director previously at Twitter. I started my education background is actually both in accounting and finance. I started my career off at Gap Inc., rotating between FP&A and corporate finance. Spent some time at an acquisition Snapfish that was acquired by HP, rotated back into Gap Inc., and then spent the last 5 very exciting years over at Twitter.
Thank you. Next up, we have Ms. Abby Obenbach.
Hi, this is Abby Obamige. I am the CFO Finance Director for the European region for Honeywell. Prior to that, I've worked in several industries across different sectors and across 3 different continents. Before then, I've worked with Hitachi, understanding the Japanese culture, worked in FCMG with Johnson & Johnson and the SC Johnsons, and also clinical research, United Health Group, and also various public and academia. So working with the 2 big universities, University of College of London, and then also Reading. So in terms of what I do, I enjoy financial transformation. I am an accounting based is my profession or my initial qualification, but also went ahead to become a project manager because I've done quite a few finance transformation. FP&A, it's the love of my life for finance, and not the other side, but that is in a nutshell my journey.
Thank you. Rounding out our panelists, we have Rena Kacker.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rena Kacker. I started out on the technology side early in a prior life, and then I moved to finance in the 90s. And I started out with fintech e-commerce companies such as PayPal, Intuit, and then happened to branch off into life sciences while continuing to do FP&A. So I've been basically doing FP&A for small and medium-sized life science companies for the most part for the last 5 or 6 years, primarily focused on expense. I feel that there's a distinct pace difference between technology and e-commerce versus life science, and excited to be here to share my experiences.
Thank you so much. Yes, let's dive in. So our first question for discussion is, talent retention has remained a top focus for most organizations. From your experience, how have you seen the labor market shift over the last few years? Also, could you share some real world examples? And I believe Lisa is going to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, so I'm happy to kick things off with this one. I think as we've all now sort of seen as we've gotten deeper into 2023, thinking about 2021 and the labor market, and really the very tight labor market that we were up against, and now looking at the labor market now and companies driving more efficiencies with how they're staffing teams, we definitely see 2 very distinct different scenarios. And so thinking back to 2021, I think most of us shared in some of the, sort of the pain of staffing teams growing, finding the right people for roles. And so it was very interesting at that time. I realized at Twitter, we sort of desperately needed a recruitment plan. Like it felt like, recruiting was like firing on all cylinders, understaffed. And so I devised a plan coming together with the leadership team on how we would actually, in a way, sort of court talent and connect more deeply with them and really showcase a lot of our culture, our mission, our values of an organization to really stand out amongst some of the other companies that they were considering at the time. And one of the things that I realized when I was putting together this recruitment plan was that we also needed a retention plan. And it's, it goes without, I think it's being this far away from it now, like it seems very simple. Like if you're going to like be filling the funnel, you don't want to be losing people from on the other side. But we were running so fast at these like very, very large growth rate numbers from a headcount perspective that we had sort of lost sight of retention. And so retention became also a very big area of focus back in 2021, along with hiring. And so now as we've sort of like shifted into more of like an optimization type of frame set. The focus is much more on performance management. I think that sort of goes without saying, making sure that we have the right people in the right roles. And really, I think spending a lot more time with candidates up front to ensure that they are the right individuals for the roles. So for us, it's been very, very different, sort of pre-late 2022 and now 2022 going into 2023.
Abby, would you like to share your perspective?
Yeah, I think I like what Lisa said when she talked about cutting the people so that they know when to get in. And also the plan is quite important. I think most times we hire on the fly or we hire when we have a gap. So it's going back to actually understand, yes, you're hiring, but what about your retention plan, which goes together? Otherwise, all that good work in hiring the right person, the right talent to fit the right culture, and you don't retain them, it's a lot of investment, not just on money side of it, but also on you as a leader and you as a manager, and also for the company. So most times when people look at retention, it's like a second nature, and more focus is on attracting what's out there in the market, but who are you attracting and to who are you pitching? So I love the term that you're cutting them and trying to make sure they understand why you are doing what you're doing, but also making sure it matches the phase of which your company is going through, because we go through different phases in our lives, in our circle, in our career, and we need to be able to have a good plan. But that's great. Not just a HRO plan, but also from a finance point of view, your team and your culture. So I like that.
I think just to add just a few more things on the retention, this idea of sort of courting not only the folks who are looking to bring in the company, but who are with the company and we want to retain. A lot of it was also listening to the individuals through, like in my seat, skip levels, making sure that I was double downing on those skip levels to make sure that everybody on the team was having development conversations, that they knew that their development was a priority of ours, with my peers, ensuring that we were having very clear, candid calibration conversations, and that we had sort of a vision for the next sort of 9, 12, like 16, 18 months out of like where we wanted to rotate people on the team. And then an interesting one that I uncovered as I met with more of the team and really doubled down on those skip levels was, the automation piece. I know, digital transformation, automation is like almost become like these like annoying buzzwords in some ways, but really like automation of some of that work, some of the like lower level work that individuals no longer want to do as they start, moving up in their level, and getting creative with ways to take that off of their plate or have that be less of their time so that they can start focusing on work that's going to, really engages them in the upper band of their level or the next level up.
think that's a great addition, yeah. And Rena, can you tell us what some best practices for recruiting new candidates and how to outshine the competition, or what you've seen and kind of utilized within your organization?
Yeah, sure. I think before we embark on the journey of recruiting, since onboarding people and offboarding people are both high cash cash usage events for a company, and also very time consuming as well, we have to be very sure that the position is indeed relevant. It is going to be aligned with the goals and sort of the framework of the team. It's not going to be in any way counterproductive to bring on. Sometimes it's very tempting to get a headcount on board just to, chase down a few high priority tasks, but in the end, it creates friction and others. So once we do know that we need to bring on a certain role, the things that I like to look for is basically 3 dimensions: skills, experience, and potential. So if someone has strong potential but is kind of down on experience and is gaining on skills, I think they can still be a very promising candidate. And similarly, if somebody is highly skilled and has tons of experience, then maybe their existing potential is good enough, even though they're not. So I try to measure those 3 aspects, besides obviously looking for a culture fit. Like I said, it's very important to avoid friction within the team, because that leads to lost productivity and loss of morale and whatnot. So culture fit is super important. And beyond all of this, it's important to see the aspirations of the incoming candidate. Some people are trying to get their arms around all wings of the finance function: treasury, accounting, finance, investor relations, and others are on a specific, let's say, a CFO path or a leadership path. So it's important to know what path this individual is on to understand how they might be the best fit within the company. Those are the things I look for.
Right. And this came in from the chat, and I think that this goes very nicely with this question, but when you're looking at FP&A recruiting, are there any best practices that any of you are using to validate a candidate's data analytics skills? Excel test a common practice throughout your hiring process, and any tips and tricks there?
Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
I think it's very dependent on level. I think this is a great, certainly a great thing to have as part of the interview loop, regardless of level, whether it's an Excel test or a business case. Particularly for FP&A, for roles that are business facing, I like to use sort of a blended a business case with a data set, so that we can see how candidates, not only what their skill level is in Excel, which is important for them to sort of do their day-to-day job, but then also how do they actually think through problems, and how do they communicate? Again, especially if it's going to be someone that's business facing, it's very, very important that they have strong communication skills and strong EQ. And so it's actually a very important part of the hiring process for us at Twitter. I will say, the Excel tests, again, are sort of more, we use them more heavily at the analyst level. But I think it's sort of role dependent. Sorry, Rena, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, and I think it's important to query the candidates on areas that they are familiar with. So a lot of candidates like to read up on the company that they are interviewing at, and they seem to memorize all the latest financials and such. And I like to take them back to their present workspace and ask them to seek out occasions when they ran into a certain situation, which could be a situation that's about to arise or is already prevalent at my company, and then see how they worked to resolve issues in the respective situations back in their companies. And you can pretty much tell who's coming from experience and who's winging it. So with that, I also like to see how granular they are willing to get into the detail of the work that they did before, because that brings out whether they did it on their own or whether it was a team or collaboration effort. And it's okay if it was the latter, as long as they are transparent about it. So it's totally fine if it was a collective team effort, and they can just share how and what and who led to the solution of that respective problem that we are trying to seek out in our company and recruiting for.
I know one thing that works for me is, especially if it's business partnering, is to actually bring my business partner to the event to actually talk to them, because it makes a difference. Because some people, and also where are we on the journey? Am I recruiting for the F, which could be the financial or the planning or the analysis? Which of the FP&A pillars am I actually recruiting for? And then I can pivot what kind of skill sets I need and on what level, because for me, the team, the dynamic of the team is quite important. FP&A is not the normal FP&A side. I call it the sexy finance section. So because we deal with the people, we deal with the data, we know the plan. So where in my team and at what point in my team? So one set doesn't fit all. So if I'm recruiting for a junior person or a junior analyst, then maybe I throw out the analytics side of it. If I'm looking for somebody that's a mixture, it depends on what the business needs. At the end of the day, remember why you are recruiting. You're not just recruiting to have a team, you're recruiting to actually serve a business. And that for me is quite important.
Thank you so much, yes. We're going to move into our next question, which is, how can you ensure existing employees are happy, and what are best practices for retaining top talent? And I believe, Abby, you're going to charge the lead on this one.
Yeah, if you want to talk about happiness, contact me on LinkedIn, because I can't give it to you here. I can't promise you happiness, but what I am passionate about is your experience and making sure that you can retain top talent. It's a two-way stream. It's understanding what is top talent to you at this cycle of your period, because I do finance transformation and every phase is different and every journey is different. But what would say is there are three main things that I actually look out for in terms of maintaining my top talent is communication. I need to communicate with them what we are into today and what the vision is tomorrow, because they might not be part of that journey. And it is okay for them not to be part of that journey. They don't have to go through the whole journey, but you can make a difference. So it's communicating where we are, where we are going, and where we want to be. And also collaborating. How do I collaborate with them so that one, they are in the right place and at the right time, then I can empower them. So making sure that they're empowered to do their job and giving them that tool set and that ability to actually strive and be better. But more importantly is coaching and culture, in terms of how do I coach them to make sure they become the next me or become the next person. If they don't become, they take the road that they need to go into. But also change is quite important. I keep saying that if you don't like the way change looks like now, you would not like what obsolete look like. So the team needs to change. And that is why I say it's a journey. So you could be happy when you started, because at that point in time, all we are doing was maybe data gathering, but we moved on and that might not be your skill set, or you don't want to go through that career journey. So my communication with you and collaborating with you as a team, I know where my top talent wants to be. And as a leader, I'm opening doors. So I'm making sure they are in somebody else's succession plan to keep them in the company if that's what they want to do. But also as a leader, understanding that one day they're not going to stay with me. What am I making sure that I'm putting in place those best practices so that when they are ready to say, Abby, I need to leave, I am able to give them the blessing to leave and actually be part of that process, which sometimes it's not. First time a manager hears your staff is leaving, the first thing you're looking at is, what about me? What about my processes? But you've had the staff all this while and you've not been able to give them what they want. Sometimes I would want to keep them, but sometimes they don't want to stay. So it's a two-way journey. But if you don't collaborate, you don't talk to them, you don't give them what they want, they have a right to leave and you have to be able to make that understanding. So we're talking about retention. You can retain to promote in terms of what you want to do. But sometimes, like I said, you can take the horse to the waters, but you can't force it to drink water. So you know where they want to be. You've given them that career aspiration, but maybe that's not what they want to do. So retaining, it's a two-way stream. for the company, for the organization, but you have to keep talking, you have to keep collaborating, and you have to make sure the culture is right, and also coach them from time to time.
Yeah, yes.
I think Abby did a really great job covering everything. If I were to add smaller things to, those really big, important items that Abby touched on. And they're smaller, but I found they were useful for me. Recognition, I think, goes without saying, like ensuring that we're properly recognizing the team or team members for work that they're doing, whether it's monetary or, there's all different ways, sending an email to them and CCing another leader in the organization or the CFO or whoever it is. Another thing that was sort of interesting to me is the more that I had a pulse on like relevant skills and I guess I'll just leave it at relevant skills in the broader job market. And the more sort of like I could, I'm not sure. So the more I had knowledge of like what was, my peers, and speaking to my peers across across other companies and understanding some of the things they're working on that were relevant and bringing that back to some of the work that we were doing and talking about that with the team, they seemed much more engaged in the work they were doing. Like, I'll give an example, headcount management is like sometimes not the exciting stuff that, someone who wants to do finance and analytics sometimes has to focus on. And so it was really interesting. Like I bring it back that I just met with a group of peers in these companies and they're struggling with the same thing. And we all, if we can solve this, this is a problem that we can share learnings across companies and would be really interesting for them to learn as well. So I think sort of like that validation of like the work that they are working on is actually a very relevant skill set that they can then go speak to, the next job that they really, really want. It seemed to drive more engagement in the work. And I think we just had more, more candid conversations about like what those individuals wanted to get out of their role at that particular time and how we could, sort of orient them and focus them on that relevant work to them at their point in their career.
Yeah, I think Lisa, you're spot on. And events like this, I encourage my team to go because sometimes we come back and the problems that we thought that were just ours, sometimes you feel better because, it's good to know the other company is going through it and they're even worse than us. So that gives a good feeling as well. So yes, you're so right.
Yeah, we even, at Twitter, we brought on a contractor to help us solve this headcount management problem we were having. And I said to that individual, I was like, if you can solve this, there's a list of companies at the same sort of size as us that you can make a business out of this. And so I think me, doing my part on understanding the market out there and what talent was sort of focused on, bringing that back in a way where I wasn't, necessarily worried about losing folks, but really kind of in it with them to skill up. I think I watched it drive more engagement and retention.
Thank you. And we have this question from the chat, which I think also lends very nicely to this conversation, but what are solutions you offer or have offered to reset the culture when the leaders of that culture leave and or morale drops?
Okay, I think that's, I think resetting the culture is quite important because then you're following, this is the way we've always done it. And that's your first big block. And culture is what it's processed for breakfast. That's the popular saying. It's actually speaking to each and every one of them and understanding where they're coming from. And to be fair, most times we, the leaders, we create the culture. So we talk about the company's culture and everything, but it all starts from our team and having that knowledge of what culture means to you, how inclusive are you in culture, how easy are people to talk about their problems, and then you are really listening to try to not to answer, but to try and actually understand with empathy and where they're coming from and try and find a solution. So I think culture, when you make it's the company's culture, then you don't actually take upon yourself to actually make a change and you come with your own culture. I've worked in different environments and I know the first time coming from an American company into a Japanese culture, I was told, Abby, you need to slow down. You just need to understand that things are not done like that. And then when I moved back to the US culture, I had learned to slow down, but still get things done. So most times they want me to outspeak and talk. And I said, no, I'm coming from a Japanese culture. We tend to listen, we tend to try and understand. And then when we are fully up to speed, we go with a speed that ability, because we know the end and the breadth of where we're going, and we go faster than when we even started. So for me, sometimes it's a cultural shift, and I have to tell myself, which culture do I have on? Am I deploying my Japanese culture, or am I in the US culture where I have to do it fast and I have to speak up and I have to not wait till anybody else understands where I'm going, but just keep going. So sometimes we as leaders, we come with our own cultural backgrounds, and be careful not to insist on it. You can build a culture together as a team and then go together as well. So for me, culture is not something that we inherit. Culture is something that we live, and it grows and it gets better. So sometimes you look back and say, this is the way we used to do it, and now this is the way we do it because we have improved. That's my 2 cents.
And I think it goes without saying, I feel like the individual whoever's asking this question, it's something that you recognize, and it's a time to lean in as a leader, particularly in instances where, like I've had times on my team where someone has left a direct of mine, and they were a huge component of the culture. And so, I think the hardest thing for individuals on the team when they do feel that void is to feel as though they're not supported and that it's not being addressed. So I think it's sort of, just asking the question, I think, is recognizing that there's an opportunity to lean in. So I would just, reiterate, it's certainly a time for leaders to lean in rather than step back and sort of, let things sort of unfold.
Yes. And Rena, we're coming to you next with our next one is, how has the finance function been impacted by the war on talent and other phenomena such as quiet quitting or the Great Resignation?
So I think there are 2 parts to this answer. One is during the time of the quiet quitting and the Great Resignation, and the other is today, because things have changed starkly. So 3 years ago, pretty much to the day, there was a lot of uncertainty, and there were entire verticals that were slowing down or even shutting down. And then there were others where everyone was transitioning to remote work, and people were trying to develop new muscles on managing school and work and everything remotely. So at that time, a lot of folks just had this awakening that maybe the work is not so important, and they found that forced hibernation at home to be very revealing. And there was that wave of the Great Resignation. And then the quiet quitting was like, I'm going to live my life and fit in work as I can. And I'm not going to obviously quit my job, but I'm going to just not give it as much importance as I was used to giving prior to the pandemic. So that was then, and especially in the sort of white collar, say, tech job market, things for, if the employment was very tight back then, the unemployment was very low. And most recently, we have seen 109,000 layoffs in the tech space. And I know we're not just limited to tech in our conversation. But now suddenly there's a little more uncertainty with employment. So I feel it's no longer as much of a workers market as it used to be in 2020 and 2021. And with the surge of people going back in looking for work, I think people are going to be taking a different view of it at this point, and evolving. But the general themes, like were shared at the beginning of the session, still persist. Like, we have to retain the employees, we have to bring in a supportive culture, we have to ensure growth, and we have to have predictability. A lot of times people leave, obviously they leave because of managers, they leave because of the company's performance, but a lot of times uncertainty and lack of predictability of the company's strategy, operations, and results is a big factor in people not willing to invest the better part of their days supporting it. So that continues to be paramount and continues to be in play.
One of the things that I've noticed, I saw a question earlier about like the right mix between finance, I think finance headcount and marketing headcount or other functions. And so I would say, generally speaking, in my experience, I've seen organizations expect a tremendous amount of leverage in their finance headcount. They tend to grow a lot slower than other parts of the organization. And so I definitely, as a manager of a team and a leader of a finance team, have felt a bit more pressure as the broader organization focuses on performance management and sort of like sloughing out this like performance management kind of glut that's been kind of sitting around for the last, sort of 3 years as we've been going through these like chapters of COVID. And so I certainly can say, as the overall organization and organizations look to optimize their headcount resources and really drive, more, for lack of a better word, sort of aggressive performance management, it, impacts the finance org as well. And it becomes a bit challenging because, my experience, our finance team didn't grow at the same growth rate as engineering and marketing and even HR. And so we didn't have as much, I think, sort of places where we had performance issues or individuals who were kind of sitting on the fence, kind of quiet quitting. So it's made things a bit challenging.
So Abby, I believe that you're gonna kick us off with this one, but what are some of the biggest challenges regarding managing a distributed workforce? So please share any solutions that you've had or any examples that you've seen.
Okay, I think a lot of us are used to the C word as in COVID, and a lot of us especially had to pivot. But I would say before COVID started and before we needed to pivot, as you know, Europe is not a country. It's made up of different countries with different timelines. And in my experience, I've had to manage across those countries. So having to sit and manage remotely is not something that is new because of COVID, but it was enhanced because of COVID. So managing across different timelines, across different cultures, and across different time and space means that there is a need to actually trust your team a lot more. And I think during the COVID period, we actually had a heightened experience as managers learning to let go of things that the bum on the seat doesn't get the job done. It's actually the person's attitude and the person's ability and drive. So from my experience, I've had to manage across time zones and I've crossed different cultures and also in different, even work councils. There are some things that are not allowable in some countries within the Europe that you can't just put up as well. So having that ability to trust your team and communicating with your team in different formats. So knowing how to actually start looking at those body language, making sure that the job is done right, but knowing what the job entails. We are in finance, we're in high pressure job. We know that we have to deliver to timelines. And then in the FP&A section, it is a double-edged sword. You have to still make sure your business partner is right. And then God help you, if you have finance transformation on top of it, you're still the subject matter expert to do that. So understanding that balance and knowing when to do that. So for my team, I make sure I cut out dedicated time to actually speak to them no matter what. And when we speak, I tend to tell them, in finance, we don't know how to praise ourselves. We're always going for the next problem. We don't, it's like a Kaizen culture. You're always trying to do something and it's another month then, it's another month then. So I tell them, please, let's end the meeting on something you have achieved. And the first time, every time I change jobs and I have to do it with a team, the first time I do that, for the first 5-10 minutes, they can't say what they've done. It's amazing how much, but just put a small finance person and they'll tell you all their finance problems. They tell you the finance problem today, yesterday, and the one that is going to, but what have you achieved? Stand back and tell me what you have achieved, no matter how small. And I remember the first time I told somebody, oh, you changed the color of your Excel spreadsheet. That is great. And she said, oh, yes. I said, because once I pick your Excel spreadsheet, I know it is you. But for the first time, you changed the color. So I know I couldn't say, and that was an achievement because she felt, oh, she was tired of looking at the same thing and she did something different. And that's how we build. So now when I'm ending my course and I forget to say we haven't done something that we should end on a positive note, they actually stop me and say, oh, Abby, I have something to tell you today. I actually did this. So they are keeping notes and actually rewarding themselves, which is something Lisa talked about. So I don't even have to reward them. They are the ones rewarding me. And then I go in and I shout it on Yammer, I put it on. There's so many ways we can praise people in different countries. There's Google Translate. Sometimes I translate it wrong in another country. I put it in a different language so that they understand and they can relate. So sometimes I've done it wrong and it brings joy to the fact that I'm even making the effort. So there is a cultural aspect of it. There is spending time. As leaders, we are called to be people's leaders. We don't do HR just for the sake of it because it's somebody's life, it's somebody's career. So I actually take it quite serious. So understanding that we work across, COVID has actually helped us bring out the empathy in us. We started talking more about well-being. We actually brought, work-life balance back to table. We actually started thinking about it. I remember before COVID, in some of the companies I worked, just before COVID started, I started rotating my team across the various days so that we all had a day in the office. And I remember one of my managers saying that, why am I doing that? That it's not supposed to be done. And I said, but they are business partners. Half the time I don't even see them. I don't want to see them sitting down in front of their table. I want them to go to their business partners. And I don't want them sitting on the table. So if they're doing it from home, then it's fine. And guess what? 2 weeks after COVID hit and everybody went home. And I called up the HR person and said, am I supposed to tell them to come back to the office? And we had a laugh about it. But that's how we have to trust our team to actually know what they're doing. And unfortunately, I can't take the next flight to Amsterdam to find out if my team made it to the office or is doing the job. The job delivers. And if they don't, I have a way to actually understand them. So I think COVID sometimes made us stop back and be humans and actually understand our work differently.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's great. And Lisa, we're going to round out our last question before we go to Q&A with you. So how does having the right finance talent in place help improve the bottom line and strengthen company culture?
Yeah, this is a great question, actually. I think when I think about, hiring finance talent, leveling up finance talent, and having the right individuals in the right roles, I think there's sort of like the ticket to entry is your ability to think through logically large data sets, think through the world and through from a metrics perspective, really drive meaningful analysis. Like, to me, that's sort of the ticket to entry in a lot of these roles and to be part of the team. But what I really think drives results and also connects into the company culture, particularly with an FP&A, is having individuals with, the right level of EQ, and really thinking like operators. And so, myself, I think a lot like an operator. I'm very curious. I want to know why things work the way they do or why they're not working. And so I find, and certainly not, in an effort to hire other people just like myself, but I find that, in like FP&A individuals, managers, analysts that really drive results with the teams they support are curious and they're willing to, step inside the box of whether it's the real estate, the head of real estate or the real estate team or the engineering team or the IT team, and like really start to understand like, why do you run the business this way? Or what are your key priorities? Or what are your biggest challenges? And I've seen some of the most interesting work come out of those types of conversations where, we had a facilities team really struggling with, how do we resource our food and beverage program? And We actually, the analyst who was deeply embedded with the facilities team came up with a metric of a cost per person per day, which, was hugely impactful for the broader real estate team, the facilities team. So I find like having that operator mindset and that empathy and high EQ really drives these meaningful relationships between the finance, FP&A, particularly the FP&A teams, and the business that they support. It's a great seat that FP&A gets to sit in. We get to sort of dip our toes in so many worlds. It's like endless, it's like endless opportunities there.
Yes. So we've got a couple of questions that I want to hit on. So the first one is, what is the best way to manage messaging and retain employees in this market when corporate bonus funding comes in below expectations?
Well, I can take a stab. I think it's important to socialize the total compensation package when meeting with employees, and it's also important to focus on the long term versus the short term. There are many occasions when in a certain quarter or certain year, the bonus will be partially funded, and it can come as a blow to some people. But typically the bonus is divided into individual and corporate components, and it's not both the components that take the hit. So it's important to discuss that, hey, our company is still pursuing fairly generous annual raises. The bonus is a measure of our delivering on our goals from this prior year, and XYZ led to us not achieving a certain goal, which is what led to this. But our path forward and our analysts' expectations of our company are still pretty robust, and there is the long-term plan is very promising and likely to be highly rewarding. And this, in the short term, if there are a few downturns along the way, that's just part and parcel, because nobody complains when suddenly the bonus is paid out at higher than budgeted brackets. So it's important to share the perspective.
Yeah, I think perspective is right, because I remember when I came in from the university environment and I went into my first private job, I didn't understand why people were complaining, because that was the first time I was getting the bonus. So anything I got I was grateful. But ask me 4 or 5 years after a while, I was a part of those that started complaining because expectations change. And Rina, you're right. Communicating and giving people the expectations, as in it's not a 1-for-1, and the pot is not unlimited. Whether we like it or not, there are going to be good times and there are going to be bad times. But for me, I think because I had come in from a culture or a place or an environment where I didn't get anything for the first few years, I was just excited. I didn't have any expectation. I just wanted to do what my job was, because that was the nature I had before. And then I became entitled, and I had to call myself and say, okay, yes, you're paid to do a job, and then anything above it, you need to understand. But that was when I was more a non-manager. When I became a manager, the whole story is different. And like you said, Lisa, in FP&A, we tend to manage different things. And when I started managing the bonus calculation, I had a different perspective from me. So when you go through that journey, you would know that really the expectations will always meet with some disappointment. You will not always get there. It could be good disappointment, it could be bad disappointment, but it is what it is at the end of the day. Do your job, do what you need to do. And then I think at the end of the day, it's like people processes, performance turns out, and it rewards itself. So yeah, maybe my glass is half empty or half full. I never know.
Perception's everything, right? Perspective and perception. So thank you. So our next question is, what is the experience that you normally look for in regards to accounting versus audit versus analysis for a strong FP&A candidate?
Well, I would look for analysis first and foremost, then accounting, and then audit. But that's just the nature of the business I'm in.
I would agree. I like that the way the question was asked, though, offers all three, because I do think I've seen in some roles and companies more than others where really just having that foundational accounting knowledge and actually having some experience in auditing is just hugely beneficial to sitting in the FP&A seat. Again, I've seen it, more important in other organizations, some organizations than others, but the three are certainly very important components.
I think for me, it depends on my team, the balance of my team. I like to have a diverse team, including experience and including skill set, because there's sometimes in FP&A, I say we are jack of all trades, master of none, in the fact that we have to be able to logically go out and find solutions for our business partners. So sometimes we don't even understand what they're talking about, but we have to find a solution because it affects their bottom line, and we need them to actually achieve that because we know what the budget is, we know what the strategy is. So it is understanding at that point. And sometimes, like I said, which pillar am I feeling? Am I feeling a finance pillar? Am I feeling somebody that is planning, that has analytics, or am I feeling the analysis side of it? If you have one of each, for me, the team is not balanced, and then you don't serve the business properly. We are here as FP&A to serve the business. Nothing starts from you, nothing ends with you. Remember, in FP&A, you start with the collection, you give it to somebody to make a decision. You are an influencer. I think before the word influencers actually was a thing, we should have actually coined it, because that's what we do. We influence, we make sure we are at the table, we are strategic. So every role is important. If I'm looking for an auditor, maybe in my finance transformation process, I want an auditor because of the due diligence, the way they ask their questions, the way they try and drive things. But if I'm not on that journey and I want something else, I look for something else. So for me, I think Lisa said something at the very beginning, having a plan for your recruitment, and that plan has to be refreshed, has to be renewed. Then you fill in the gap. Then you don't just wake up in a hurry and say, this is what I want. And when the person leaves, and if you have a gap, it's a time to look at your team again and say, how can I support my team so that we can run faster or achieve better goals?
Thank you. And I think we have time for our last one, which is, how do you motivate employees to take advantage of company-paid trainings?
Company-paid trainings, you said? Sorry.
Yes, sorry. How do you motivate your employees to take advantage of those?
I'll just quickly offer up. I led by example, and I took, we had a couple that I said I wanted to take. Please join me. And also, we offered a learning credit as well, where you could go out and take some sort of course outside of the company, which was shockingly underutilized. And so that was also something where, in a larger team meeting, I put it on as agenda item. Let's talk about it. And folks came up with some really great ideas where they paired off and took classes together.
Yeah, Abby, Arena, any thoughts on this one? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think for me, it's same with Lisa. I like I said, mentioned in the beginning, I did, I'm a project manager, and that's because the company was paying for it. And I did it. And then next thing, I came back and I told the good news, and I made sure my team did it, but I made sure they had time to do it. Because the killer is they don't understand if their job will be done. We are in finance, there's a month end coming, and then we get stuck in the rut of just doing the same thing. And then you wake up 25 years later and wonder, what have I been doing with my time? There is so much out there. There is so much that we do. But sometimes you have to lead by example. So when I see something that I like, I tend to want to talk about it in my team meeting. It might not be relevant for them at this point in time, but it will help them. It will help you as a manager, because you are making sure the vision you have, you don't go out, find it. You can actually enhance it in your team. So sometimes I actually assign things to them. If you have those kind of portals in your workplace, I look at it and put it as part of your development, but put it on time. We agree on the time. And I actually maybe give them time. And now, what are you doing here? Stay behind and read, especially those that are studying. I actually take their meetings for them and say, go and read, because that will make you a better person, make me a better person, make the business partner happy. So sometimes as managers, you have to try, but at the end of the day, you can only lead them to the waters. You have to own your career, is what I tell my team. You might walk out of the business, but the brain walks out with you. It's as simple as that. It's yours.
Well, thank you, Lisa, Abby, and Rena, all so much for your very wonderful insights and just banter back and forth. So thank you all, and thank you everyone for joining.
That's great. Thank you, Stacy, Lisa, Rena, and Abby for a wonderful panel discussion. I also want to thank everyone else for joining us today for this fantastic session. Now, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. This officially concludes the Argyle CFO Leadership Forum FP&A Strategies for Success. Thank you again for joining us and engaging in our content, and have a great rest of your day.